Good evening and welcome to The Strand. I'm Christina Foxley, the Director of Events, and I'm pleased to introduce Ted Conover and William Finnegan, here tonight to discuss Conover's new book, The Roots of Man, How Roads Are Changing the World and the Way We Live Today. I think William T. Vollmann said it best in the Times Book Review, so I'm going to completely plagiarize from him. As I read this book, I grew increasingly impressed not only with Conover's bravery and hardihood, but more important, with that quality one associates with Steinbeck, heart. The 6 road situations he describes are undeniable quandaries, and we owe it to the people caught up in them, not to mention to our planet, to consider what policies, if any, should engineer the roads through everyone's lives. Ted Conover is the author of several books, including New Jack, Guarding Sing Sing, winner of the National Book Critics Circle Award and a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, and Rolling Nowhere, Riding the Rails with America's Hobos. His writing has appeared in the New York Times Magazine, the Atlantic Monthly, the New Yorker, and National Geographic. William Finnegan is a staff writer at the New Yorker and the author of several books, including Cold New World, Growing Up in a Harder Country, and Crossing the Line, A Year in the Land of Apartheid. He is a member of the National Writers Union, PEN American Center, and the Writers Guild of America. Following their discussion, Ted and William would be happy to take your questions. I'll be walking around with this microphone, so please wait for that before you speak. And then Ted will sign copies of his books for you, which you can purchase downstairs on your way out of the store. Please join me in welcoming William Finnegan and Ted Conover to the Strand.
Thanks. I guess I'm sort of in charge. Is hardihood a word? That doesn't... I'm mainly just going to ask Ted questions and get him to... I mean, hardihood is a good description of... I don't know how many of you will have read this book yet, but it's got some amazingly deep travels into some pretty difficult places. So if it's not a word, let's use it. Anyway, but it's also with these sort of linked stories, and I'm going to ask Ted what the links are, how they were chosen. But it amounts to me to a sort of huge meditation on modernity. I mean, he goes into sort of far corners of the world, less and less developed places, and comes back into cities and back to the U.S. and sort of meditates on all these things. And there's a first-person aspect to it all. I mean, he's there seeing this stuff, interacting with people, living with people, and a kind of implied autobiography. And there's these sort of connecting sections, which are each kind of surprising and tenuously connected to what's just on either side of them, but are real, not reporting expeditions, but real meditations. So you feel the kind of author's journey through life in this book, and he actually in the introduction talks a little bit about his kind of wanderlust that got him going early. He talks about his higher education road trip, and it's pretty obvious where he got the more rigorous testing, training, and general education. But I wanted to ask first, Ted, a question about how you keep your balance. I mean, personally, because this is kind of, as I say, again, I'm not sure who's read the book or not. I don't want to summarize too much, but he goes deep into the Himalayas and the Amazon, and there's a section, Forest Primeval to Park Avenue, the first chapter, tracing mahogany and being put into somebody's apartment in Park Avenue to where it grew in the Peruvian Amazon. Chinese car driving mania, Lagos, Nigeria, which is a sort of nightmarish quality to a lot of the places he goes. But it never takes on that kind of knee-jerk, sort of apocalyptic paranoia that you find in a book like Robert Kaplan's The Coming Anarchy. I mean, you could be really freaked out and intensely glad not to be in the places you report from. But it never really concludes that way. I mean, you have obviously moved back and forth for years and years to write this book, and I wonder how you keep your balance, sort of mentally, emotionally, personally, in all this.
Well, that's a good question. Thanks for asking it. Thanks for thinking about my book, Bill. And I just want to acknowledge, I don't know if Bill even remembers this, but I'm sure you do. Years ago, I heard about an AIDS conference in Amsterdam where a paper had been delivered on the role of African truck drivers in transmitting HIV via sex workers on routes between Mombasa and Central Africa. And the newspapers referred to something called the Trans-African Highway, and I couldn't figure out what that was. And I asked Bill, because he lived in Africa a long time, what that meant, and he said it doesn't mean really anything. It's a whole network of roads that are called that. And back then it was hard to you couldn't like type that in a Google search box and learn everything there was to know. You had to ask somebody who'd spent time there. So way back in one beginning of this book is William Finnegan. So thank you, Bill, for coming. Keeping my balance is a lot easier with a project like this than, say, with my previous book about Sing Sing, where I was working in a prison every single day. In fact, like time and a lot of overtime as well. And that took me a little off center after a while. These trips were interspersed with time at home, and time at home with my family is really it's like one of the it's this pole of my life that enables all this other stuff I do. So if I didn't have that to go home to, I couldn't do this, and if I hadn't had that to come home to, I couldn't have done New Jack. And not only as my wife forgiving, I thank her and the kids for the long, loving leash is the best way I thought to put it in the acknowledgments of the book. But she's really smart and good to talk about things with, and I have a handful of other friends I can do that with as well. So it's I really think it's important for a writer to get away from everything familiar and comfortable and known, and dislocate without a lot of prior conceptions about what he or she will find, and soak it up. Stay somewhere long enough that that you start getting used to it. But then I think coming back is what clarifies. So this book had a good rhythm behind it. I took usually 2 journeys a year. There are 6 roads, so you'd think 3 years. Well, no, I had to go back to some of them a second time. And there were a couple of dead ends. Oh, see? I'm using a road metaphor inadvertently yet again. Hard to avoid when you're writing or just talking. As I was writing this, I kept realizing I'd inadvertently said something like bump in the road, or took an unexpected turn, or any of the approximately 1,000 road-related metaphors that seem to me our main way of talking about life, actually. I think roads serve that function in our consciousness, so I lumped them all into a couple of pages in the epilogue and tried to take them out of everywhere else. I don't know, did that start to answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That passage, which is a comic passage, not particularly representative of the book, but is really, it's at the beginning of the epilogue, and it's just one cliche after another, and he's sort of trying to advance an argument, an explanation, but you're so lost. Your career puts you in either the fast lane or the slow. Some will choose the high road, others the low. Either way, there may be detours. You may find yourself on a rocky road. That idea is up my alley. Don't worry about and it goes on for